You're looking now at the United Center in Chicago, where the third night of the Democratic National Convention will soon kick off. And with only 76 days to go until the U.S. presidential election, both Democrats and Republicans are ramping up efforts to sway swing voters. And some of these votes might come from Asian American and Pacific Islanders. They are the fastest growing racial and ethnic group in the United States. And to speak more about this is Chen. She's the co-founder and executive director of the Asian and Pacific Islander American Vote, and she's joining us now from Chicago. Christine, thanks so much for taking the time. You know, we often talk about the Latino vote, we talk about the African American vote, and just like with those two groups, the Asian American and Pacific Islander group is not a monolith. It's very diverse, it's very complex. Can you explain to a Canadian audience just how diverse and complex it is?
Yeah, so the category of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander is quite diverse, right? Because when you look at battleground states, many times you'll be maybe focusing on Filipino Americans in Nevada versus in Michigan, you'll be focusing on Indian Americans, or in Georgia, it could be about the Korean Americans that you're focusing on engaging, right? So when we're looking at the fastest growing immigrant population here in the United States, you also have to really recognize that depending on where they're residing, there are going to be different demographics of the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander community.
And I remember in the last election in 2020, a lot of focus was put on the AAPI electorate portion because there was an understanding that they were getting out to vote, that the voter turnout has really risen between 2016 and 2020. Why is that? What accounts for that?
Well, heading into 2020, there were a number of things that were happening. The community organizations had more of an infrastructure. They were getting ready for the presidential elections, but then that same infrastructure was also getting out the count for the census. So luckily, because of that, when the pandemic hit, we saw the same nonprofit organizations, community-based, trusted messengers in the community, not only getting out the vote and getting out the count for the census, but they were the ones on the grounds dealing with the rise of anti-Asian violence and dealing with the pandemic. So I think because of these organizations, they were able to connect the dots for the voters to let them know what they were facing and experiencing is also tied to decisions being made by your elected officials at the local, state, and federal level. And as a result, we continue to see a rise of voter registration in 2020 as well as in 2022.
I did want to also ask you about voter registration, but also about volunteers coming out. Kamala Harris obviously was on the ticket as the VP candidate in 2020. She is now the presidential candidate on the ticket for the Democrats. And she is an African American, but she's also an Asian American, a South Asian American. So what kind of impact has her identity had on the AAPI registration and also in terms of volunteers, you know, calling up their local chapters to volunteer and asking what they can do?
Wow, it's been really amazing. I mean, when you just look at what has happened and transpired in the last 4 weeks, we've now seen South Asians for Harris, Chinese Americans for Harris, Korean Americans for Harris. So many different entities are organizing not only nationally, but also in the different battleground states. And all of them are also bringing in with the context of understanding that this community is growing because in Georgia in 2020, we knew that Biden only won by less than 12,000 votes. Yet the Asian American vote, about 26% were first-time voters in 2020. That accounted 3 times the margin of victory in Georgia. So if they could re-engage those voters once again and take into account the growing population of the Asian American electorate, whether it's in Georgia or in Nevada, they could really win this election because of this growing population.
Christine, we have a little bit of time left, but just coming off a little bit of what you said there, Senator Tammy Duckworth once said, "We are the margin of victory." And when you gave that example of Georgia in 2020, it certainly was the case. What are the Democrats doing in terms of outreach to reach out to the AAPI communities across the country?
So my understanding is that they do have a advertising plan. They've also been hiring in different congressional districts, staff, and actually investing in trying to figure out how they're going to actually provide translated mail as well as multiple touches of phone banking and text banking to the different voters. That's why I understand from the partisan side for API Vote, since we are a nonpartisan organization, our job is to actually also get the voters ready to make their plan to vote. So we actually have invested to actually mail out to 1.7 million households with translated mail 2 times, and then to service them with in-language advertising, digital ads across the country in these battleground states.
Thank you so much for this, Christine. Christine Chen, co-founder and executive director of the Asian and Pacific Islander American Vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good day.